You're watching Sportstar. Today has been a very important day if you're a fan of wrestling or if you've just followed what's been happening in Indian wrestling over the last couple of weeks. All of our top Indian wrestlers were sitting in protest at Jantar Mantar in New Delhi, asking for an FIR to be lodged against the former WFI chief Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. There is a long story about why they've actually gotten to that spot. And if you don't know what we're talking about, might be a little too long winding to deal with in this particular video, but we'll drop resources for you to check out. Today, we are actually going to reach out to our New Delhi correspondent, Uthra. She was there on spot when the Supreme Court hearing was happening, not at the Supreme Court, but she was with the wrestlers, just sort of following the reactions of what was going on along with them. And we're basically going to try and understand what's been happening in Delhi, why they're protesting for a second time, and just what's happened now that the Supreme Court's directed an FIR to be filed. Not directed. I mean, the Delhi police themselves have said that they will register an FIR, but the Supreme Court's also given them a few more instructions surrounding that registration. So, Uttara, can you just take us through what you saw today? What happened today in the lead up, maybe, or just when that hearing was happening?
See, this thing has been going on today was the 6th day of these guys sitting on protest. When they knew that the Supreme Court hearing was supposed to happen today, and they were waiting for what the directive must be. Once the Supreme Court did come out with the order that said go ahead and file an FIR, the Delhi police had filed a submission that they will file an FIR by end of day today, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. Once that thing came, these guys did say that it's a first step towards their victory. But they will not end their protest, because now they want him to be actually arrested and thrown behind bars before they leave this spot, which I think gets slightly tricky. I'm sure those who are more well versed with the legalese will be able to explain the legal terms, legal complexities behind this. But in very layman terms, you can ask for a complaint to be registered and a registered FIR to be done. You can also ask for a time-bound investigation or probe into it. But to actually demand that someone is arrested and thrown behind bars as a condition to end your protest, it takes you into slightly trickier ground and uncertain ground, where you are not very sure whether that's something that actually can be done or something that you can demand from the agencies and the authorities.
Mm-hmm. Right, fair enough. One of the things that the wrestlers were talking about right after that order came out is that they don't really have any faith in the state police, in the Delhi police, to just go through with it, because they were like, we've been waiting here for six yes. days. If you had to register it, you would have. Mm-hmm. What is the sense you were getting just after that order came out? Were you able to see, I know you were talking about the place being crowded with people, but were you able to see what the immediate reactions of the wrestlers were? Was there any relief at all in that one step being ticked off?
There is relief, but it's a very small step, like they said, and it's true. It is not a huge thing getting an FIR registered, but getting that itself done has taken so much effort. So yes, in a sense, it does show that all the pressure that's been coming on from all sides has forced Delhi police to go ahead with this submission. We also have to remember that Delhi police is not exactly the police of Delhi. It's something that's under the central government and answers directly to the Home Minister. So we can't say anything, but clearly there has been consultation, there have been talks, and unless there is a go ahead from the top, the Delhi police cannot actually take any action, which is not fair, because legally they are bound to file an FIR. But then again, the whole political equations and the system of Delhi per se as a state city is pretty complex in terms of who controls what. So Delhi police is under Delhi, but it's also under the central government. So there are a lot of political overlapping that happens whenever something like this, a case like this comes,
Right, fair enough. One of the other things that this sort of throws up again is the fact that, I mean, we've been hearing Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh constantly come out and say, I've not done anything. I'm open to whatever investigation.
Right.
So the IOA did set up a committee. There was a panel that was put forward. There
Yes.
was an investigation that happened and a report that apparently never came out.
Mm.
Are you hearing anything on that front? Will this investigation help that report sort of come out and maybe be open to scrutiny now?
It should, because the Delhi police has said that it has asked for the probe report, the committee report from the oversight committee set up, and they will go ahead with their investigation based on that report, taking that as the base. So yes, that report has to come out. But again, when we talk about sources and everything, the way things have been leaked out, uh, it's pretty clear that there is not much to indict Brij Bhushan in the entire report. Uh, we have again read comments in different media where one of the members has said that there was just one girl who spoke about sexual harassment. The wrestlers claim that almost 12 to 15 women wrestlers have deposed in front. The government has said that no evidence has been submitted. The IOA has said that there is not they don't have enough to go ahead and proceed against Brij Bhushan or indict him. So that particular report, I don't think there is much to lay emphasis on. But then again, if the Delhi police makes that as the basis of it, then it has to come out. Again, we have to remember that there were two committees, and right now the oversight committee was the one that was made by the sports ministry. Of course, the other committee is also headed by Mary Com, which was made by the IOA. And we have no idea about what happened to that particular committee. The IOA members, including PT Usha, have not said anything about it. They've not even spoken about it. So we have no idea what that committee did, whether it even met or not, or are we just confusing the two committees? Were there two committees that actually probed into it, an IOA committee and the oversight committee by the ministry, or just one committee actually submitted a report? That second committee that IOA made, was that merged with the ministry's committee, and was there just one? So even the IOA has not actually come out and said anything what happened to the internal committee that they formed with Mary Com as in charge. So these are things that I hope will come out when the Delhi police actually starts their investigations and probe into this entire affair.
Right, fair enough. Now, this is obviously about the case and what's happening with the kind of allegations that they've leveled against the WFI and the people working there. Now, the other aspect of this is, of course, this is really pressed pause on Indian wrestling, so to speak, because you have all of your top wrestlers. In a way, it's a very, I don't know what the correct word is for this, but it's very unique to see them train at Jantar Mantar. I mean, that's obviously not the best possible outcome for them when it comes to just their careers as such, and they seem to be pretty adamant about the fact that it's okay if this means there's a change in wrestling that's as big as a medal for us. But what does this mean for other people who are not there? Like, for example, Ravi Dahiya is not there. We don't see him every day. We're seeing these three couples, so to speak, like these three pairs of wrestlers who are there. What about the rest? What happens to Indian wrestling now with this entire thing up in arms?
That is an interesting point, because when these guys first sat on protest in January, they had total support from the entire wrestling fraternity. And this is a question that a lot of us have been asking. The wrestlers have been cagey about answering it. They admit that other wrestlers might be scared and concerned about their own careers, and they do not want to come out openly. But we haven't seen much support, except from something that a very cryptic statement that Ravi Dahiya put out yesterday or this morning, if I'm not wrong, which did indicate support for these wrestlers. But then again, that's just one, and that's come only now. Other than that, we haven't seen any support from any wrestlers, any of the other wrestlers, whether openly or on social media or physically present at the spot. Nothing has happened. In January, it was a lot different. What we are seeing now is more like is a lot more politically, I would say, I'm not sure how to put it. There's a lot more political support this time. There's a lot more social support this time in terms of organizations, whether it's the farmer organizations or the Mazdoor organizations or the student organizations or the various political parties, the Khap Panchayats and everything. There's a lot more support that's spread out, but from within the fraternity itself, it's there's hardly anything, not even indirect support, which actually makes you wonder where exactly this protest will go from here on. Because we need to remember that once the IOA has made this 3-member ad hoc committee that it formed yesterday, that committee has to not just hold the elections to WFI in the next 45 days, they also have to undertake the day-to-day working of the federation, which also includes sending entries to international meets. Now, I'm not sure, but I think the last date to send entries for the Asian Games in wrestling is 31st May, which means that that also comes under the purview of the ad hoc committee because it's in within the next 45-day period. So they have to conduct the trials, they have to have a final entry list for the Asian Games. And will these guys go and participate in those trials? What about the other wrestlers? Because they are training, and because these guys have been off training for so long, even if they do go and participate, it's highly unlikely that they'll be able to win those trials and book a spot for themselves. So, one, whether they will go for those trials, when those trials will be held, if these guys don't participate, then what is the next step? If they do participate and win, then what is the next step? Because then it will again become slightly tricky and a dicey issue. Because what do these guys do? Do they train because they've qualified for the Asian Games, or do they get back on protest? It's everything has to happen in the next 1 month, and that's not a huge time. So these are a lot of nitty gritties that still need to be worked out, and I'm not sure even the wrestlers have actually thought out about this in such detail right now.
Absolutely. What is the experience of just standing there? And like, for example, today, we were trying to get a photographer to just get one proper shot of one of the wrestlers. And that did not happen for a while because people were just walking in, walking out.
Yes.
We've been seeing Medha Patkar, we've seen Brinda Karat, all people who were first asked not to be not to take over the stage in the first stage of the protest, were then now invited back. Is there a sense, have the wrestlers explained why they've gone the political and social movement way? Is it just so that they can amp up the pressure?
We did ask them this, and they admitted. In fact, they said that they're sorry that they kept everyone away in the first stage, because what they say is that we were pretty naive, and we didn't want to turn it into a political thing. We wanted to keep it to wrestling, and that's why only wrestlers and people from the wrestling fraternity were allowed on the stage during the first phase of the protest in January. But then what they say is that it didn't really lead to anywhere. The government didn't do anything. They formed a committee that hasn't really been very helpful. The IOA didn't really bother much with the whole thing. Said we've been sitting quietly for the last 3 months, and absolutely nothing has happened. And we realized that, and that's what the wrestlers say, that we realized that if we do not allow other people from other stratas of the society, other sections of the society, which includes political parties, which includes social activists and everything, if we do not allow them, then the government and the IOA will not take us seriously, and they'll keep running roughshod over us, because the accused in this case is a very powerful member of parliament from the ruling party. So what they say is that we thought keeping it to sports would help us, because we are fighting for truth, as it were. But they said that the last 3 months have told us that it doesn't really work that way, and we've learned our lessons. And there's no point in keeping it to the wrestling fraternity, because we actually do not have any pull or anything to pressurize the government with. It's only when other people, whether it's the activists or the political parties from opposition, come on, that the government actually starts taking us seriously, and that's the only reason. Because otherwise, they won't take us seriously. We can keep sitting here forever.
Right, fair enough. So as it stands, we of course have the admission by the Delhi police and the Supreme Court order that is sort of asked them to now go ahead with the FIR. We also have protection that's going to be given, security that's going to be assured for anyone who feels like their security is threatened, plus the minor complainant in the case. And the Supreme Court has not disposed of the case, which is another important part of this. So they're going to keep track of how this goes as well, which the Solicitor General had some apprehensions about. Just you were in touch with Krishnadas Rajgopal, who is the Hindu's legal correspondent, who was getting us all of these details as they were happening in the Supreme Court. What did you get? What was the sense you got from him, rather, just in terms of that particular bit of the Supreme Court not letting the case go and still being on top of things? They've asked for a review again on May 4th. So what do you think the court expects to see in the next maybe 7 odd days? Have you got a sense of that from Krishnadas?
The order doesn't really say that, but you do. But yeah, we do get a sense that the court also realizes that the person in question here, the former president of WFI, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, is not someone who can be taken lightly. They do understand that he comes with a huge baggage behind him in terms of the cases and everything. He hasn't been convicted in any of them. We need to remember that, regardless of how many cases are filed or how many cases he's in excused in or whatever. He's never been convicted for them. But they do realize that he has that muscle power, he has that political clout. So, and I think the court also understands that this is something that can blow up, especially because it talks of sensitive issues like sexual harassment and harassment of a minor and everything. And especially at a time when I mean, yesterday at the IOA, there was a very interesting comment which a lot of people did find bizarre. The Joint Secretary and AIF President Kalyan Chaubey said, "We are the fifth largest economy, and sports is a soft power that takes the nation to the world." Now, it might sound bizarre, but it actually makes a lot of sense because what happens in sports in any country does have a lot of resonance across the world, even if it's a small issue. And these are things that actually do lead to other countries creating an image of your particular sport. And because it's a sports thing and because it's a wrestling thing, which is actually a pretty popular sport and it's one of those very few sports which is equally popular in the West and the East. So you have a lot of top wrestlers coming from Central Asia and the Eastern Europe and the erstwhile Soviet nations. But you also have some very top wrestlers coming from the US, especially among the men. And then you have China, Japan also as superpowers in wrestling. So it's one of those very few sports which actually is worldwide popular. And India being kind of the birthplaces of wrestling, as it were, as we claim it to be. There is a lot of focus on what happens in the sport in India. So it might sound bizarre, but at some level it does make sense. And I think somewhere at the back of their minds, the justices, including Chief Justice Chandrachud, I'm sure they did have this in mind that whatever happens here does resonate across the world.
Absolutely. So now going forward from here, I mean, we can keep talking about this. I'm sure these conversations are going to keep happening, especially because it's so unclear, right? What's going to happen over the next couple of months in terms of just the wrestlers or this case or what happens to the WFI. All of it is a little murky right now. So we will keep having these conversations. But as it stands, just from what you were seeing today or what the fact that the Supreme Court has taken this up, do you sort of get a sense that this might be a turning point for Indian wrestling itself? Because some of the questions that these people have raised, not just about the WFI chief, but also about various rungs of personnel, right? From maybe the deputy president or people in the state associations, or they've in fact asked for the whole system to be revamped. So do you sort of see this, does it have merit to be sort of a place where Indian wrestling goes in a different direction from where it's been so far?
I'm not sure about that, honestly, because I read comments where today, just recently, about half an hour back, where apparently Brij Bhushan has told people that he's ready to resign if that helps end the protest. But that doesn't really make sense because he's not fighting the elections this time anyway. So his resigning or not resigning doesn't make sense. The WFI has been the WFI elections have been declared null and void. It has been put under an ad hoc committee. So his question of resigning doesn't come up at all. Secondly, he doesn't really have a choice. Also, it's not that he has decided to not fight elections. he cannot fight elections because he's completed his 3 terms. What is interesting is, from what I'm hearing, that he said that he's not too inclined to make his son, Karan Bhushan Singh, who's also a vice president in WFI, he's not too keen on making him the next president, which might be interesting because that means that he's okay with someone else taking charge as the president. But we need to understand how Indian sports actually works. I mean, you have seen it too. It's not just wrestling, it's across the board. And it's not just one person or one post that actually matters. You can keep replacing presidents and vice presidents and joint secretaries. It doesn't really change the entire system the way it works. There are state bodies, there are state federations, then there are state Olympic bodies. There is it's a very complicated web of administration, and it's not easy to simply wipe off or erase the complete hold that one person has just by removing him from the post. So yes, Brij Bhushan not being there might make slight difference. It might be the beginning of a different president's era. But then again, to expect this to completely revamp the system, to completely erase Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh's hold from Indian wrestling per se, I think is a bit too far-fetched and a bit too much to ask for.
Absolutely. On that note, this actually sort of just leaves the door open for us to keep coming back and discussing this case as it develops. Please make sure you log in back and keep track of all of the stuff that we put out. As and when there's a court hearing, we will be there. As and when the wrestlers say anything at the protest, which at this point we're still waiting for, given that there's everybody else talking there. As and when something develops there, we will make sure that we have it for you. Our team of reporters in New Delhi are on it as it develops. But up until then, we will drop resources under this video for all of you all to check out. And that would be all from today.